15 seconds. That's how long the lights lingered after the first crack of thunder tore through Birch Hollow on the night of July 12, 1997. In those 15 seconds, the valley held its breath. Then the storm swallowed everything. The trees bent like frail limbs, fences splintered, and the sky bruised itself into a deep, menacing purple. A sudden and eerie stillness came just before the blackout. Like nature itself, retreating. At 148 Merriman Road, a modest two-story farmhouse sat trembling under the weight of the storm. Inside, the Harper triplets Mia, Noah, and Lily, just 5 years old, were playing in a blanket fort, lit only by a flickering candle. Their older brother, Lucas, barely 12, stood nearby clutching a fading flashlight, the beam barely cutting through the encroaching dark. Downstairs, Grace and Daniel Harper worked frantically to seal the windows, trying to hold back the howling wind that clawed at the house like something alive. And then, just minutes later, the triplets were gone. There were no signs of a break-in, no shattered glass, no screams, just an open back door swinging on rusted hinges, footprints leading out into the muddy yard, and then nothing, no returning steps. As if the children had walked off the face of the earth, morning came grey and soaked, and with it, panic. Volunteers combed the fields and woods, calling names that vanished into the trees. Bloodhounds traced a scent all the way to the edge of Devil's Throat Swamp, where it simply stopped, as though the air had turned too heavy to hold memory. Searchers waded waist-deep in murky water, hearts pounding, but found no trace of the children. Just silence and shadows that seemed to lean too close. Inside the abandoned blanket fort, investigators found 3 melted crayons, a Polaroid camera with its last image capturing nothing but a ceiling corner, and a damaged cassette recorder, its tape missing. The house, once warm with laughter, felt hollow now, its walls absorbing grief. The town responded the way small towns always do when innocence is lost. They clung to each other. Candlelight vigils lit up the church steps night after night. Farmers left porch lights burning. Posters bearing the children's faces became part of the landscape, faded and flapping in the wind like forgotten prayers. Theories spread like weeds. A stranger in a blue truck. A sinkhole. An old, uncharted cellar. But every thread frayed in the hand. Grace stopped answering reporters. Daniel threw himself into work, until even that couldn't hold him. Lucas, once vibrant, goofy, always sketching superheroes in the margins of his notebooks, went silent. For 73 days, not a word. He became a ghost, haunting his own childhood. When the case went cold in early 1998, the state boxed it up and moved on. But the Harpers stayed. They kept the children's bedrooms untouched, the tiny handprints on the wall sealed behind glass. The past became their present. Grief calcified into ritual. Years passed. Daniel succumbed to illness, carrying with him the weight of a father's helplessness. Grace turned the house into a shrine of memory. And Lucas, now in his 30s, a man forged in silence. By day, he moved freight through warehouses. By night, he chased ghosts. He filed FOIA requests like they were sacred scrolls, studied maps, old weather patterns, interviews, anything that might explain what the wind had taken from him. On the 20th anniversary, a small plaque was placed near Devil's Throat Swamp. People left toys and trinkets there. Tourists took photos. Some called it spooky. Others called it folklore. But for Lucas, it was neither. It was still an open wound. That night, as the wind whispered through the cattails and the sky once again turned purple with rain, he stood alone in the dark, watching the plaque, and in the silence, he listened not for answers, but for the echo of tiny footsteps, and a door that had never truly closed. The days after the storm blurred together like wet ink on a forgotten letter. The Harper house, once filled with the thudding of small feet and the echo of bedtime stories, now throbbed with silence. Reporters gathered like vultures on the gravel road. Helicopters buzzed overhead, briefly casting shadows on the cornfields where the triplets used to chase fireflies. Flashbulbs popped. Microphones stretched forward like weapons, But the only sounds that mattered, 3 small voices, were gone. Lucas watched it all from the upstairs window, numb behind the lace curtain. He hadn't cried, not once. Something in him had shut off, as if his heart had flipped a breaker switch. Adults spoke around him, never to him, and when they did, they talked in that tilted tone people use with kids when they're terrified themselves. The official search lasted 18 days. Volunteers came from neighboring towns. Boats scoured the swamp. Divers sank into the murky water. Dogs whinnied at the treeline, refusing to go deeper. Psychics offered visions. One claimed the children were beneath the earth. Another saw 3 flickering candles in a storm, blown out one by one. The police politely dismissed them, but Lucas remembered every word. As days passed, the media frenzy decayed into speculation. Theories began to mutate. Some said Grace and Daniel were lying. Others said the children had wandered off and been claimed by nature. A few whispered darker things, unspeakable accusations that clung to the family like mildew. The pressure cracked. Daniel first. He became obsessed with fixing things: fences, floorboards, anything physical. He'd stay up all night hammering nails into places that didn't need repair. As if trying to rebuild time itself, Grace wandered through the house in her nightgown, checking the children's rooms over and over. She left the hallway light on, always, and Lucas disappeared. Inside himself, he stopped speaking at school, refused to eat vegetables because Lily hated them, kept 3 chairs empty at the dinner table. On Christmas morning, he lined their shoes at the foot of the staircase like offerings. What no one saw was the note. 3 days after the storm, Lucas had found it tucked beneath his pillow. A child's drawing, crayon on ruled paper. 3 stick figures under a crooked sun. A 4th figure stood apart, alone, holding a square box. His name, Lucas, was scrawled in shaky letters at the bottom. He never showed it to anyone. He'd buried it under his mattress, like a seed he wasn't ready to plant. As months rolled on, the case was officially closed as unsolved, with suspicion of abduction, but no arrests were ever made. No suspects ever charged. Birch Hollow moved on, but the Harper home, DIDN single quotes, Grace eventually locked the playroom. She couldn't bear the sight of it, the faded wallpaper with elephants, the toys lined up like they were waiting. She stopped going upstairs altogether. Her world shrank to the living room, where she sat with a single lamp glowing, listening to the rain. She'd begun recording herself little voice memos no one else ever heard. Day 119. The wind came again last night. I thought I heard Mia's laugh. It was probably a fox. Day 274. Lucas drew something in chalk on the driveway. 3 stars and a door. He said it came from a dream. Meanwhile, Lucas started keeping maps of the woods, the swamp, the sky. He began drawing things he didn't understand: shapes, eyes, doors. He read about weather anomalies, electromagnetic shifts, ancient folktales. He even found a book on Appalachian disappearances and scrawled 1 line across the margin in all caps. The wind takes what it wants. One day, in 2004, a box arrived at the house. No return address. Inside, the missing cassette tape. It was old, warped, melted in places, but the label still read, Triplets Fort Game. Lucas knew that tape. He remembered hitting record and telling them to say something spooky while inside the fort. They'd giggled and whispered nonsense. He never remembered pressing stop. The police tested it. The audio was nearly unrecoverable, just static, and the occasional pop, but Lucas heard it. At timestamp 043, just before the tape gave out. A sound like wind, then, a child's voice. It's behind the door. Then silence. It should have been a breakthrough. But the tape was deemed inconclusive, probably corrupted. A trick of audio decay. Case still closed. Lucas didn't believe that. Not for a second. He began going to the swamp alone. Sitting for hours at the edge, listening. At 19, he slept in the old fort for a week straight, candle-lit recorder on. He wanted the wind to come back. He wanted to hear it. He left college, got a warehouse job, something simple, something quiet. But at night he hunted for the door, whatever it was. He was certain the storm hadn't just taken his siblings, it had opened something. The grief was no longer sharp. It had dulled into a low hum, like tinnitus for the soul. But the obsession, that stayed sharp, razor-thin, and always buzzing. In 2016, after Grace passed quietly in her sleep, her final memo whispering, "They're not gone." Just out of reach, Lucas inherited the house. Alone now, he returned to the playroom, peeled the tape off the door, stepped inside. It smelled like dust and dreams. He turned on the old cassette recorder, placed it on the shelf, and whispered, "I'm ready." He didn't know what for. But something was shifting. Again. The years moved forward, but Lucas Harper did not. His face matured. His shoulders broadened, but inside he remained that 12-year-old boy standing in a candlelit hallway, listening to the rain and waiting for anyone to come back through the door. In the world outside, life carried on. Birch Hollow changed. Houses went up, cornfields went down. Kids who once passed around flyers with the Triplets, faces now pushed strollers of their own. Time softened the sharp edges of memory. But Lucas remembered everything. He kept it. Hollowed notebooks, police files, weather reports, even local legends printed from forgotten internet forums. He didn't live in the house. Not really, he haunted it. Slept on a cot in the attic. Ate cold canned soup. Lived among boxes labeled evidence in red Sharpie. His job at the shipping yard paid just enough to stay afloat, but he rarely showed up for full shifts. He was too busy walking old trails with a tape recorder in hand, waiting for sounds the world said didn't exist. Grace's old voice memos became scripture. He catalogued them, transcribed them, filed them by tone and word count. He noticed patterns certain days when the wind was stronger, when electrical interference knocked out radios in a 3-mile radius, when the swamp mist rose higher than it should. There was a rhythm to the quiet, and Lucas was determined to crack it. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday in late October, exactly 20 years and 99 days after the disappearance. Lucas was sorting through boxes of old items Grace had tucked away in the basement: school drawings, forgotten toys, a cracked piggy bank. One box was marked MISC, Fort Stuff. Inside, beneath a layer of dust and mildew, was a small plastic bag. Inside the bag, a tiny object, a charm bracelet. Lucas remembered it immediately. Mia's. She had cried for a week when it vanished, days before the storm. No one had been able to find it, but now it was her, except it wasn't dirty. Not aged, not water damaged, not worn like a trinket missing for 2 decades. It looked new. The metal chain, still bright. The plastic beads, still gleaming. The clasp, not rusted, but smooth. That bracelet shouldn't have been there. It shouldn't have looked like that. Lucas checked the box again. Tucked in a corner, half folded, was a child's drawing, charcoal lines, this time, not crayon. 3 figures standing in a circle of trees, and one Mara-shadowed figure drawn upside down. The paper smelled like smoke. It wasn't Grace's style to keep creepy drawings. It hadn't been there before, had it? Something shifted inside him then, not panic, not excitement, but a cold, clinical clarity. Like something had pressed play after 20 years on pause. He began combing through everything again. This time, not with the eyes of a grieving brother, but, like an investigator who knew the killer was close. There were patterns in the photos from that night. In one, a curtain blowing, not odd, until he noticed it was on the wrong side of the house for the wind direction that night. A loose page in the police file mentioned a neighbor seeing strange lights over the cornfield. The officer dismissed. It is lightning. Lucas didn't. He digitized old home movies, ran spectrograms on background noise. At 16 minutes into one tape, Christmas, 96, a faint static blip. He enhanced it. The waveform resembled a hum, not mechanical, not electrical, human. He played it backward, a voice, no words, just a sound, like a breath being drawn in reverse. Then came the dreams. Lucas hadn't dreamt in years, or at least hadn't remembered them, but suddenly, night after night, The same image, a hallway filled with fog, a flickering light at the end, and 3 silhouettes walking away from him, hand in hand. When he woke up one morning, his palm was covered in charcoal dust. He hadn't touched a pencil in weeks. The lines between obsession and haunting were no longer clear. And then, the second object arrived. No box this time, just a small soil-covered tin lunchbox left on the back step of the house. Inside, a Polaroid. The image showed trees. But not just any trees. Lucas recognized the place instantly. An abandoned farmhouse, just outside the hollow, long since swallowed by the woods. In the corner of the photo, a blur, white, child-sized, moving beneath the photo, a note, typed on yellowed paper, time folds. What was opened must be closed. Lucas took a week off work, packed supplies, charged every battery. Left a note on the kitchen table. If I don't come back, tell them I didn't stop looking. The old farmhouse hadn't been visited in years. The roof had caved. The floorboards creaked like warnings. But Lucas wasn't there to be safe. He was there to find the next piece. And he did, in a crawlspace beneath the floor. Covered by a slab of warped wood and a thin layer of dirt, was a wooden toy train. Noah's Lucas turned it over in his hand, heart thudding, carved into the underside. In scratches no child could make. There's something about truth when it finally begins to surface. It doesn't rise gently, it tears, it bleeds, it drags everything else with it. Lucas Harper had spent the last 2 decades in a prison of silence, but now the walls were cracking. The world was whispering. Objects were reappearing. And nothing was as dead as it once seemed. The toy train, left beneath the farmhouse floor, was only the beginning. After finding it, Lucas didn't sleep. Not in the way normal people do. He rested with his eyes open, listening to recordings loop in the background, mapping the symbols carved beneath the toy scratches, so deliberate, they almost formed a language. On the 3rd night, he noticed a pattern. Not in the words, in the pauses between them. The scratches mimicked something: coordinates, Morse code, a cadence, and then it clicked. The scratches lined up with electrical poles in Birch Hollow. Specifically, 7 utility poles on the outer ridge near the swampage, one spray-painted. Decades ago with cryptic white circles locals had once blamed on bored teens. Or, the mentally ill. Lucas followed them. Pole by pole, he traced the line like a thread through the woods. The farther he went, the quieter the world became. Even birdsong dulled. The trees were older, leaning like mourners over a forgotten grave. At the 7th pole, the circle wasn't just spray-painted, it was carved, and beneath it, a second, simpler crescent turned upside down, just like the shadowed figure in the charcoal, drawing from the box. Lucas knelt. The earth here was soft. He dug with his hands. 6 inches deep, he struck wood. A small, blackened box, burned on all sides, but intact. Inside, a child's shoe, and beneath the shoe, a cassette tape. There was no label, just the word, listen, scratched into the plastic with a needle point. Lucas raced home. He didn't even change his clothes. Inserted the tape into a dusty deck from the 90s. Hit play. Static, a long pause. Then, a voice, not one of the triplets. Not his own. A woman's voice, trembling. It whispered. They opened the path. They weren't supposed to, but they did. It took them, one by one, and now it's hungry again. Another pause, a sharp inhale. Then, I watched them disappear. Not like a movie, like fog, like breath in winter, and I didn't scream. The tape ended with a sound like wind howling through metal, a long shrieking feedback loop that made Lucas tear off his headphones. He played it again. At the 47-second mark, beneath the woman's words, a new sound emerged, humming, a child's lullaby, off-key, slow, repeating the same 5 notes. Lucas recognized it, Mia's favorite bedtime song. Grace used to sing it while brushing her hair. This wasn't an accident. The past wasn't just speaking, it was calling him. He dove deeper. The farmhouse, the poles, the cassette, they were pieces of a larger puzzle. He mapped the locations, marked them in red. When connected, the points formed a shape, a triangle wrapped in a spiral. Not random. Not organic, deliberate, a symbol. He started hearing the humming, even when the tape wasn't playing. At night, in the kitchen, in the basement where the toy train had reappeared. One evening, while cleaning out Grace's old desk drawer, he found something odd hidden behind a loose panel, a newspaper clipping from 1972. Headline: 3 local children vanish after lightning strike. No bodies found. Lucas froze. The names were different. The location was different, but the date. Exactly 25 years before his siblings disappeared. And in the photo that accompanied the article there, it was again. That shape, graffitied on a tree in the background, the spiral triangle. Lucas cross-referenced missing persons cases in the county archives. And now. 1 year ago. 3 teens missing from the nearby reservation. Vanished during a thunderstorm. All storms, all groups of 3. All 25 years apart. Someone or something was keeping time. At this point, Lucas stopped thinking like a brother. He began thinking like a witness, a messenger, a potential victim. The clue trail hadn't ended. It was evolving. He received an envelope in the mail the next day. No return address, no postmark, just his name, printed in shaky blue ink. Inside, a photograph. Recent, not faded. A blurry image of 3 figures standing just beyond a tree line, holding hands. Faces unclear, but Lucas felt it. Deep in his chest, they were his siblings. On the back, handwritten in red pencil, close to home, closer than you think. Lucas stared at it for hours. That night, he didn't sleep at all. The next morning, he returned to the one place he had avoided for 20 years, the storm cellar. The door had rusted shut. Nature had tried to bury it. But Lucas dug with his hands until his fingers bled. When he pried the door open, the cold hit him first. Then the smell: wetwood, old metal, and something else, ashes. The air inside was thick, unmoving. Time had settled in this space like a dust too fine to see. The last time he was here, he had watched Grace run through the rain with flashlights. Watched his mother cry at the stairs. Now, there was only silence. He found something buried in the far corner, beneath old gardening tools and forgotten jars of preserves. A blanket, a child's blanket, torn, half-buried, wrapped inside, a photograph, one not taken by him, or Grace, or the police, a picture of Lucas's age 12, staring out the window, captured from outside the house. He flipped it over. There was a note. You saw it too. You just forgot. Sometimes evil doesn't hide in shadows, it wears them. It becomes them. Lucas Harper had always believed the enemy was time, memory, maybe even fate. He was wrong after discovering the old photograph of himself, taken by someone outside the farmhouse decades ago. Lucas began to question everything, his memories, his conclusions, even his sanity. He pulled police records from 1997. Eyewitness statements. None of them mentioned a person near the house that night. Just the storm, the wind, the vanishing. But there was one detail buried in the case files, redacted, and almost forgotten. A man, seen by a neighbor, dressed in black, standing in the field just minutes before the triplets disappeared. The description was vague. Long coat, wide hat, too tall to be local, face unseen. That statement had never been followed up. Written off as a stress-induced hallucination. Lucas wanted to believe that, until he found the photo album, tucked inside the back of an old church donation box, buried beneath water-damaged hymnals. Was a leather-bound album that didn't belong to anyone in his family, but the photos inside, were all of them. Taken from a distance, over years, the triplets at the fair, Grace gardening, his father chopping wood, and every few pages. The shadow standing behind a tree, reflected in a glass pane. A silhouette in the background, unmoving, unchanged, never closer than necessary, but always there. The earliest photo dated back to 1984. Lucas hadn't even been born yet. He tried showing the photos to the sheriff's department. They dismissed them as doctored. Creepy, they said, but not evidence. But Lucas wasn't looking for their approval. He was following a trail. and it led him to one place he hadn't dared go. The abandoned residence on Elder's Path, the one whispered about in town folklore where the storm never left. He broke the lock on a cold October evening. Wind shrieked through the trees like something alive. Inside, the house was dead silent. Dust coated everything. Furniture wrapped in sheets. Walls yellowed with age. And yet, in the center of the room stood a chair, facing the window, clean, as if someone had just left. On the table beside it, a music box carved from the same wood as the box that once held the child's shoe. Lucas turned. The crank. The lullaby played again. The same 5 haunting notes. From the cassette, Mia's bedtime song. Only this time, as the melody slowed, a hidden compartment popped open beneath the box. Inside, a lock of blonde hair, tied in a red ribbon. A Polaroid of 3 children crying in the dark, and a paper note, torn and burned at the edges, with a single sentence written in red. I keep what is offered. Lucas stumbled back. The walls of the house seemed to close in. It was all connected. The disappearances, the storm, the cycle, the offering. He fled the house, heart pounding like war drums. That night, he dreamed. In the dream, he stood in the field behind his childhood home. The storm was back. Wind slashed across the grass like blades, and in the distance, at the edge of the trees, stood him, the figure, in black. Lucas couldn't move, couldn't speak. The figure raised one hand and pointed. Not at Lucas, but at the farmhouse and Then Lucas woke up, covered in sweat. Lungs aching. There was dirt under his fingernails. His boots by the door were muddy. Had he gone somewhere? He checked his phone. A new photo. No sender. It was a screenshot of an old video recording. One he didn't remember taking. It showed him standing in the field, facing the woods, and behind him, the shadow. Closer now. The antagonist was no longer hidden. It was watching. And it was moving closer. There are voices the world forgets. Children who disappear into shadows. Women who scream into the void. Men who die standing unheard. But some voices never leave. They echo. Through floorboards. Through fog. Through wires buried in the earth. Lucas Harper didn't believe in ghosts. Not really, but when the voicemail arrived, he stopped breathing. It was 3:17 a.m. when his phone lit up. One missed call, unknown number, no voicemail transcription. Just the spinning loading icon, broken, as if the phone itself didn't want him to listen. He pressed play anyway. The voice was familiar, a girl, young, shaking, her breathing fast, erratic. Then, Lucas, it's me. I don't know how long I've been wherever this is, but I found something. I remember now. The path wasn't a path, it was a door. We didn't walk through it. We were taken. Lucas froze. It was Mia, his sister, his twin. She hadn't aged. Her voice sounded exactly as it did the last day he saw her. The message continued. He only comes when the sky opens. The thunder isn't thunder, it's him. He watches from the trees. But he can't take all of us at once. That's the rule. That's the law of the other field. But I broke it. I stayed behind. I hid. I saw what he did to them. A long silence, then a whisper choked. I heard Daniel scream. I saw Leah run. But the moment you screamed our names, he turned to you. That's when I slipped out. Another silence. Lucas clutched the phone, trembling. The voice returned, softer. Now, nearing the end, I've been trying to call for years. But time doesn't work here. Sometimes it rains for a month. Sometimes the sun never rises. But there's a gate, Lucas, in the cellar. You saw it once. You just didn't know what it was. Then the final words, a whisper, barely audible. Don't come for me. Not unless you're ready to leave everything behind. Click. The message ended. Lucas dropped the phone. He fell to his knees. Everything he knew, the truth he had believed, the grief he had buried cracked. Open like a rotted door in a storm. She was alive. Or something like alive. The gate in the cellar. The one he had found years ago, a rusted metal circle set into the dirt. He'd thought it was just old plumbing. But now he remembered. A memory he hadn't revisited in 25 years. Burst back like a flood, The night after the triplets disappeared, rain still falling, he had wandered into the cellar, clutching Grace's hand. She had paused at the far wall, stared at the ground, and whispered, "It's closed." Thank God. He hadn't asked what she meant, but now he knew. The cellar wasn't just where something had come out, it was where something had been locked in. He returned that morning, dug, for hours, with shovels, then with bare hands, and beneath the dirt, deeper than before, he found it, a heavy circular hatch, no handle, only a carved symbol, the spiral. Inside the triangle, and beneath it, AHAND .small .child-sized burned into the metal. Lucas touched it, and the metal turned warm. The ground trembled from beneath the hatch. He heard it, a voice soft calling his name. There's a moment when you stand on the edge of something ancient, and the silence around you doesn't feel empty. It feels aware. Lucas Harper stood in the cellar, mud-caked to his palms, breath misting in the cold air, as the hatch beneath him pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. His sister's voice had said, "Don't come. Not unless you're ready to leave everything behind." And yet, he came, because some absences scream louder than presence ever could. Because the only thing louder than guilt is love. He placed his palm over the burned handprint. The metal shifted. A click, a hiss of breath, then slowly, impossibly, the hatch opened. What lay below wasn't stairs, it was light, flickering, amber gold, like fireflies dancing through fog. And somewhere in that light, a whisper, "Mia." He stepped through. The cellar faded, time cracked, and Lucas was 11 again, standing in the field. Rain falling like bullets, his siblings laughing, spinning in the storm. Mia turned, smiled, then screamed, and he was there again. The figure in black. But this time, Lucas didn't run. He walked toward the shadow, unclinking, determined, and as he did, the shadow stepped back, crumbled, folded in on itself like smoke, and then silence. When Lucas woke, he was outside, the cellar gone, no hatch, no gate, just earth, but in his pocket something cold. Silver pendant with the names of the triplets, etched on the back, and one more name below them, Lucas. He never found Mia again. But the nightmares stopped. The whispers fell silent, and for the first time in 28 years, the Harper farmhouse didn't feel like a tomb, it felt like memory. He stayed there, planted a garden in the field, where the storm had once opened the sky, built 3 wooden crosses, and 1 stone bench, with a plaque that simply read, "Some stories don't end, they echo." Every year, on the same night, the wind rises, the trees shudder, the sky turns bruised and hungry, but the farmhouse stands, and so does Lucas, waiting, just in case another voice ever finds its way home.